I suppose Whitebeard predicted it first, before any of us even considered a live-action series based on one of the most popular manga of all time to be possible. This series has been anticipated since January of 2020. At that time, and all the way up to the very first hours of August 31st, people have both been excited for it and dreading it. And what was there to say? It was announced in 2020. For all we knew, it could have just been one more herald of the apocalypse. But now that it's out, it's time for us to dip our toes into this great new pirate era and see if it's something that was well worth the wait, or just another flop that takes something so wonderful and turns it into a joke. Welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels and following us on all of our social media. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. Ghost in the Shell, Death Note, Cowboy Bebop. These are just 3 of the greatest anime to ever grace our screen, and each one having their name tarnished and left to rot in the annals of the Netflix graveyard. Their live-action series being almost completely unwatchable. Like, there's even a meme format about how bad Netflix adaptations are. Dragon Ball Evolution and the Avatar live-action movie both laugh to see the other greatest animated successes fall to the same level as them when people believe that the fantastical and somewhat disturbing traits seen in animation can be faithfully replicated in a live-action series. That's one thing I've come to learn for some of these live-action series. There is one big reason why they fail, and that reason is execution. Execution can turn a great series into a flop in 2 major ways, at least when it comes to adapting anime. Those reasons are because the series is either not faithful to the source material or is too faithful. That's why I feel many series seem to fail. There are just some things that are too strange to be done by real people. What may be lighthearted and funny when in cartoon form may be disturbing and off-putting when we see real people doing it, even if through CG. That's partly what I thought would occur when I was preparing to watch this new series. Luffy's Gum powers were just way too strange and fantastical to not somehow be disturbing when put into live action, and heavens help us if they ever adapt Gear 5th into live action. I'm still nervous about that. But would I say that this series was bad, actually? Did you think I was gonna spoil this review and tell you what I thought about it immediately? No, you gotta watch through until the end if you actually wanna know, so grab your straw hat and all your doubloons or whatever other piratey thing you can think of and sit back. Let's get this started. When I sat down to watch the first episode, the first thing I wondered was just how much are they going to be able to keep? After all, I mentioned before that one of the biggest issues with live-action adaptations is that they're either too faithful or not faithful enough. There are just some things that are too weird to add in, and because of that, the series is going to suffer. When it comes to adapting something as flashy as anime, a genre known for being over the top, you can't help but wonder just how much of it is actually going to work. Well, the first sign that I knew it was probably going to be good, it actually wasn't because of anything I saw. It's what I didn't see that made me know people loved it. And by that I mean I was having a hard time making my Netflix work. I don't know if anyone else had this issue or not, but every time I fired up Netflix, the loading time was a lot longer than it normally was, and I had to attempt to watch One Piece 3 times before I actually could. If I wasn't kicked out of Netflix by just trying to click on the episode list, I was kicked out about a minute 40 into it. Hey, maybe it's just that I'm having a bad day for Wi-Fi. Or maybe it means that Netflix's servers were being overrun, spreading the bandwidth too thin. I was legit scared I wouldn't be able to watch this, but eventually I managed to make it work. I can honestly tell you they got the locations right. They even added Sixus Island, which was pretty wild. I enjoyed some of the Easter eggs hidden throughout the first episode, and it should be known that the only episode I've seen so far was the first one. I know I should have probably at least watched 3 of them, 2 to give it a fair shake, but I thought it was important to report upon my findings. The first scene possesses plenty of figures that many hardcore One Piece fans will notice. Or you could just be like me and say, hey, I saw Shanks in the crowd, and then giggle a little bit. Gold Roger's execution was portrayed fairly well, pretty graphically, which should be a sign to all people tuning in that yes, there will be some violence to the story, served as a good build-up of tension and excitement. By this point, many One Piece fans were already engrossed in the show as it starts off with a narrator explaining the world of One Piece and showing us a pirate map. but the chains clanking as Gold Roger was led to the gallows reminded me clearly of the opening scene of Pirates of the Caribbean 3 at World's End. Speaking of Pirates of the Caribbean, the scene of Luffy in his little dinghy boat tossing out the leaky water with a bucket reminded me of Pirates of the Caribbean as well, especially when Captain Jack first shows up at Port Royal. These two elements, while not particularly from One Piece directly, reminded me of another classic pirate series that I was obsessed with while I was a child. And that likely was the intention, to hook both fans of the anime and manga series as well as people who have never seen it before by relating it to a more widespread pirate series. From the opening scene, we can tell that it's faithful to its source material, as what we can see of the map contains areas we know and references are made to various other parts of the series that aren't immediately available to those who have just started reading One Piece. It's obvious that the people who created this truly love One Piece. Then again, that should be expected. Ichiro Oda is one of the executive producers of the series. He did, of course, have his own little bit of hesitation that the show could be any good, likely learning from his peer Akira Toriyama, who has in the past roasted the live-action adaptation of his most famous work. But unlike what Toriyama had to deal with, it's obvious that those who worked on this adaptation of One Piece truly cared about keeping it accurate to the story as well as keeping it accurate to the world itself. But as I said, sometimes with live-action adaptations, keeping it 100% accurate can be a pitfall itself to the success of the series. So were they 100% accurate? Well, no. Those who know One Piece can see that there were some elements that were cut, other elements that were added, and many episodes and chapters fit into about the 64 minutes worth of content. There was some story shaving, yes, but do you really want them to adapt every single detail and end up with a live-action series that's over 1,000 episodes long? Well, some of you probably would want that, actually. But regardless, the story elements required to be Romance Dawn were there, and they were told in a way that didn't feel like they were jumping around too much. The timeline kept up with its rhythm and managed to tell the same story in a much shorter amount of time, all while keeping the proper feels that One Piece normally gives us. That leads into characterization. Many characters are shown, but the most important is our main cast, as well as the episode's villains. We start where we should, with Luffy. Luffy's character is played by Iñaki Godoy, a Mexican actor with, so far, a limited list of parts. I expect that to change very soon, given the current reception of the series. What can I say about Godoy's performance though? Was it actually Luffy? Kinda. One of the things I worried about most was that none of the actors would feel like the characters and feel more like a cheap cosplay taking place outside an anime convention. But Godoy's performance seemed to keep most of the spirit of Luffy's character alive, while offering a few changes to make it believable. That said, not everything is 100% accurate, and believe it or not, that is a good thing. There's a balance that needs to be maintained, and I feel Godoy did this. While Luffy's one-track mind was played in a somewhat corny way, you also gotta realize that people don't generally act like Luffy, and his character traits are rare to find, and even rarer to believe, even if you meet it in the wild. And by wild, I mean this concrete jungle we all live in. And while there were a few differences that I could note, but for some reason can't quite peg, the general spirit of who Luffy is was maintained. Kind, generous, caring, a little dopey, one-track minded, a bit of a glutton, and overly confident. Perhaps what the hard thing to peg I'm feeling is just a slightly different mixture of these things. I think mostly it's that Luffy in live action seems more intelligent than actual Luffy. Like, he says things that make him seem like a total buffoon, but in all actuality his general feel is one of overwhelming confidence. I can't wait to get into the next few episodes to see how this changes. One thing I desire to see most from this portrayal of Luffy is to see his sudden switch from happy-go-lucky to I'm gonna kick your ass. Here's hoping that comes true. Moving on, we have Nami. She's portrayed by the actress Emily Rudd, an equally new actor. Her portrayal of Nami, especially during this time of One Piece where she, and I suppose it's fair to say everyone, was cautious of Luffy and the others, is spot on. Her actions and thieving skills are perfect, and her character remains almost no nonsense. I really thought that the way that Rudd portrayed Nami fit the character very well. Now, moving on to Zoro, he was portrayed by Makenyu, an actor with a pretty long career list that consists of other live-action adaptations, such as the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure live-action movie, Tokyo Ghoul, Fullmetal Alchemist, and Saint Seiya. Sadly, for those who know, most of these were flops, but it seems like the curse is broken because One Piece is set to pick up steam, with many of the series' most faithful viewers riding the hype train straight to Wano, or wherever else this train, or I guess, boat is going. Now, as for Zoro, who is first seen on the island of Sixus, an island that hasn't even been portrayed in any form of film until now, where he gets into a fight and kills Mr. Seven of Baroque Works, which was also introduced earlier into the live-action adaptation than in the other series. Zoro in this is portrayed as an absolute badass. But how is his character compared to actual Zoro? Well, honestly, his portrayal left me a little disappointed. Zoro is generally portrayed as reserved, cold, calculated, and full of passion. This adaptation of Zoro felt more overly dramatic, which I can't say I don't understand. Sometimes it's hard to portray someone cool, especially if that cool person is from an anime. But nonetheless, I felt this portrayal left a lot to be desired, and could have been done better by making him a little less intense. More mysterious than outright dark. But I will admit that through the entire first episode, I had each of my fingers and toes crossed, waiting for him to don the do-rag and use his three-sword style. There was a rush of adrenaline when that wait paid off. The choreography for him was over the top, and the same could be said for all of the characters, for better or worse. I mean, it looks good, and the way each stunt double, as well as actors in certain scenes, perform their stunts did leave me impressed. But let's talk for a moment about Devil Fruits. Yes, I understand that the scene where Luffy got his was different, but it's not overly different, and it's easily forgiven. The big thing I'm talking about is powers, such as those displayed by Luffy and later Buggy. Now, I'm not into the second episode yet, but I have seen clips of Buggy, and I can say that it can be a little disturbing. I mean, it's expected from Buggy. He's meant to be creepy, like if the It monster had a baby with Barbossa and named it Deke Shaw. But Luffy's abilities can also be a little off-putting as well. I mean, it looks wonderful, and it looks real, and maybe that's why I'm a little disturbed by it. It looks too real. Bro took a bullet to the chest and bounced it back. U factor plus 10. But I suppose this is what you should expect walking into it. This is Stretchy Boy's show, and if you don't want to see stretching, then don't watch The Boy. This is just one of the many pitfalls that befall adaptations like this. It's either not faithful enough or it's too faithful, and on this occasion it's a little too faithful. That thing that's supposed to make us laugh and is supposed to be comedy fodder becomes nightmare fuel, but as I said before, these are just some things you can't avoid when it comes to an adaptation like this. And honestly, the show could be far worse without it. I mean, can you imagine an incarnation of Luffy that doesn't have stretchy powers and simply can't swim? Yeah, that alone would have sunk the adaptation and left it in the Netflix graveyard. So they're gonna have to do it anyway, so they might as well just own it, and that's what they did. So far, the powers are well done in computer generation and hard to distinguish as anything but real unless you're looking too hard. Speaking of other things that don't translate well from the anime and manga, some character designs entirely. Some of these being Helmeppo or Kobe. Helmeppo, for one, isn't out of the realm of possibility to exist in the world we're looking at, and while he certainly looks funky, he's a believable character, if not a little over the top. I'm a little hard-pressed to believe that a pirate could afford pink hair dye like Kobe had. Not to say I'm throwing off on this, it's just another circumstance where you're caught between a rock and a hard place. One thing that I do admire is the variation in the outfits worn by the main characters. Just by looking at the season trailer at the end of Romance Dawn, let me know that there's going to be plenty of outfit changes for the characters, which is going to make them feel real, while also offering some nice nods to other outfits Luffy and friends have worn throughout the series. Moving on to the series as a whole, I find that the One Piece live-action adaptation possesses the same charm and heartwarming feeling as the original series. Every time we see Luffy show up and tell someone to do what they love, and to tell them that true pirates aren't just thieves and murderers, but free people, it really hits you in the heartstrings. Nami flatly telling Luffy that she hates pirates only for Luffy to say, well, it's just because you haven't met me yet is, I guess the term I would use for this is, it was just such a Luffy thing to say. That was my initial reaction to it. When Luffy showed up to Zoro and asked him to join his crew, and Zoro said no, and Luffy freed him anyway, despite Zoro telling him that he doesn't owe him anything, was just general altruism, and it rang true of Luffy's personality. It was topped off by a touch of comedy when he asked him to close the hatch behind him. When Nami and Luffy are facing off against the Marines and Captain Morgan, and Zoro sees that he can escape, but instead decides to fight alongside them, it's when you know that you've got a crew. Kid may be naive, may be annoying, but you can't help but die for the fellow. That's how Luffy feels in the anime and the manga, and I feel that he was portrayed well in this adaptation. Luffy's parting with Kobe also tugged on a few heartstrings and managed to give us hope, reminding us that partings may come and circumstances may change, but friendships can last, so long as we let them and we don't give up. Which is a pretty vocal message in One Piece. How to care for your crew, and that's a big plus. The spirit and feel, the charm and vibe, it's all here. It's fun for the whole family, kinda. Save a few scenes that probably aren't safe for work. But other than that, it's fun for the whole family. So all in all, I really liked it, and if you ask me, I would say that it lives up to the name and the hype, and is not, and I repeat, not one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Just to be sure that I was being honest with myself and not accidentally riding the hype train, I decided to do a little experiment. I decided to go grab my sister and show up at my parents' house, tie them down, and force them to rewatch the first episode with me. I love you, mama. This was a bit of a test because my sister is also an anime maniac, but is level-headed and will tell you the honest truth if she thinks a show sucks. As for my folks, well, they have very little experience in anime besides what I tell them, so it was not only really a first exposure to the live-action series, but a first exposure to One Piece in general. My parents had not even heard about the One Piece live-action adaptation, so I knew that their opinion would be one of honesty, unbiased by hype. So I provided them popcorn and taped open their eyelids and let the episode play. Here was their honest reaction. My mother thought it was fun, but was a little disturbed by Luffy's powers. I think when Helmeppo was strutting around in the nude with Zoro's katana was when I lost her. But my father, on the other hand, laughed his rear off. He seemed to be having a better time watching this than even when he was watching Ahsoka. I asked him about it at the end, and he seemed to understand Luffy's power and their cause. He seemed to understand his relationship with Shanks, and even asked if Luffy was wearing Shanks' hat and if that meant Shanks was dead. I didn't spoil anything for him and told him that we would just have to wait and see, but all in all, from my father's pure reaction to this, I knew my judgment was spot on and trustworthy. Because if someone who had never seen One Piece before could both understand it, understand the characters, have fun, and have the same genuine experience as anyone who was watching the anime, I knew that it must be just as good as I thought it was. And it might even be the perfect segue to get people who don't know One Piece's anime or manga interested in it, as the live-action adaptation won't seem quite so foreign to people, especially if they've watched Pirates of the Caribbean. Yes, there are flaws, and there are times when you feel that some things should just never be portrayed out of animation, but all in all, this is a genuinely good and fun adaptation to an already wonderful series, and it's obvious that the actors, directors, and all other staff involved really loved what they were doing when they did it, and that the love they put into it fuels the spirit of what One Piece is about. Freedom and doing what you enjoy. I give it a solid 8 stars based on my own reaction and that of my family. It's not perfect, but it doesn't need to be and shouldn't be. This was one of the most fun times my family had watching streaming together, and that means more to me than all the gold in the Grand Line. Tell us your experiences with the live-action adaptation and what you would rate it. I have yet to see the other 7 episodes, so I likely know even less about it than you do, but I would love to hear more about it. Until then, One Piece out.
Did you enjoy our video? Well, then be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, and make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos.